lifelong Jean-Claude Van Damme fan. The very first rated R movie I ever saw was Bloodsport, and I've been watching his movies ever since. Actually, back whenever The Expendables 2 came out, I went to go see a marathon of Van Damme movies where they showed 4 or 5 of his movies in a row. Before they showed the movie Lionheart, they actually had a heart-eating contest, which was awesome and disgusting all kind of at once. So right now it feels like we're in a bit of a Jean-Claude Van Damme renaissance because you've got Jean-Claude Van Johnson, you've got Kickboxer Vengeance. And so with that, I wanted to talk about the 5 best Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. And kind of with that, I didn't want to just try and rank them kind of arbitrarily. I wanted to kind of cluster them into different eras and into different times and genres of his career. Category number 1, the recent years, and I've got The Expendables 2. This is where we really get to see him shine as the villain. For so long, he'd been the lead character who was fighting the villain, and now we get to see him as the ruthless villain that gets to kill the lesser of the Hemsworth brothers, which is pretty awesome to see in a movie. But this is a movie that was perfect for him at that moment in his career to like establish him once again as still a physical presence, as like a better actor, a better screen presence than maybe ever before in his career, and just having lots of fun doing it in a movie that had its tongue just firmly enough in its cheek to be a great, great time. As an honorable mention, I'm going to put Kickboxer Vengeance. It just came out. I really enjoyed it as a simple, straightforward remake of the original, where he gets to be in that mentor role, which I really enjoyed. Our second category is going to be The Zeros, and I'm going with JCVD. This is a movie that came out where, for people like me, I'd kind of forgotten about Van Damme. Like, I still watched his old movies, but I wasn't paying attention to what he was currently doing when this movie came out. He'd done a lot to straight-to-video movies, and they just kind of gotten kind of forgettable to me, and so I wasn't paying attention. Then this movie comes out that's getting great reviews, and Time Magazine actually says that JCVD has the second best performance of the year 2008 behind Heath Ledger's The Joker, which no one has ever expected Jean-Claude Van Damme to get that kind of praise. But if you see this movie, you understand where there's coming from. So it's a movie that's very self-referential. It's a movie reflecting on his career where he's playing himself. And there's actually a 5-minute monologue where he just talks straight at the camera, reflecting on his life and his career. And it's just this remarkable performance where you really get to know him. My wife didn't grow up watching his movies, and so she always was kind of like, okay, put on a Van Damme movie, until we watched JCVD. And it was like a light bulb went off. It just clicked. Oh, now I get this guy. There's more to just the persona. He's a person. It's a great movie that really created a new part of his career where he really was acting and taking things seriously in a way that we hadn't really seen before. As an honorable mention here, I'm going to put a movie called Until Death. It's kind of one of those movies that I haven't heard anyone talk about it. It's a movie from his direct-to-video era where it's kind of like the Harrison Ford regarding Henry from 25 years ago, where a guy gets shot in the head and it kind of changes him a little bit. And that's what this movie is. He's kind of a corrupt cop that's a very terrible human being, and then gets shot in the head, and then kind of has a path for redemption. And I watched it and was just expecting another dumb action movie, and it had a lot more to it, a lot more drama, and an actual acting performance. And one of the first times I saw a performance from him where I was like, wow, this is carrying this more than, well, his feet kicking people in the face. Our third category is sci-fi action, and I'm going with Timecop. I love time travel stories, and this is a great, simple time travel story about what if time travel was involved, and what would people do with it? Well, people would use it to try and rig the future for their personal gain, so you'd have to have cops traveling through time trying to stop them. Time Cops. It's a simple title. It can sound a little bit silly, but it's a premise that's very intriguing. He was the right guy at the right time to do this, and it's one of his best directed and best produced and best written movies that's very nicely constructed and a very entertaining movie. And an honorable mention here, I'm going to go with Universal Soldier, which was directed by Roland Emmerich, who went on to do like Independence Day. So it was a very strong director, once again, that directed the movie, and has Dolph Lundgren, and a very entertaining movie. But if I have to pick between these two action movies, I'm going to go with Timecop. In our fourth category, it's action, and I'm going with Hard Target. This movie was directed by John Woo, who's coming off an incredible string of amazing action movies in Hong Kong, and he makes his American debut here with Hard Target. And for me, you can tell the difference that this is a different class of director than some of the previous earlier films that he'd been doing. There's just a much more better visual eye to it. Just that every little aspect of it is a little bit better constructed. The characters seem a little bit richer than his previous films, and you can can see how these are better produced and better made movies than his earlier stuff, which I love. And so this is one of those movies that's crafted very nicely, where it kind of slowly builds and the tension builds and it gets bigger and bigger as it goes along, to where the action at the beginning is very simple, and by the end of it, you've got the explosions, shootout, windmill kicks, all the cool stuff you want, but it twists and turns and builds up a little bit better. For the honorable mentions here, I'm going to go with two of them. I'm going to go with Sudden Death, which is Jean-Claude Van Damme's Die Hard set at a hockey rink. And the second one I'm going to go with is Double Impact. I actually saw Double Impact for the first time only a few weeks ago. And so it is a very fun Jean-Claude Van Damme film. It didn't knock my socks off. It was nice to have two Van Dammes, but it was just a solid action movie. For our final category, I'm going with Tournament Fighters. I'm going to start off with my honorable mentions. And the first one is Kickboxer. This is the definitive revenge tournament film when it comes to Van Damme. Him taking on Tong Po is just classic Van Damme. The training where they're doing crazy stuff and dropping coconuts on him and stretching his legs and all that stuff. Classic Van Damme. Love this movie. Just such an iconic where they're dipping his hands in glass. Just absolutely love this stuff. The other one I'm going to go with is Lionheart. Second honorable mention, there's going to be Lionheart. It's not quite as iconic as Kickboxer or my number one pick. However, it's a movie that's very enjoyable. It's just different enough, little different of enough spin that it really pops. Actually, at that Van Damme event that I was talking about, my wife told me it was her favorite of the Van Damme films. But the ultimate, most iconic film of his definitive genre, the tournament fighter, is, of course, Bloodsport. I could see where some people would go with Kickboxer for the revenge aspect. For me, it is going to be Bloodsport, simply because of the just array of different characters that he's fighting. It's not just him fighting Tong Po. You've got all these different fighting styles, from the sumo guy to you've got the Muay Thai guy, then you've got, of course, got Chong Li. So iconic, so many memorable moments that you remember. And the fight choreography really, it holds up. It stands up really well because they're using so many different styles and trying to showcase them all so well and how his style defeats them. So it makes for a very enjoyable movie, and it's got Forrest Whitaker in it. You gotta forget that Forrest Whitaker is one of the cops chasing him in this movie, but he is. So that is, for me, the most iconic, the definitive, the number one Jean-Claude Van Damme film. It is Bloodsport. So how about you? What would you say are the top 5 Van Damme films? What is the most iconic one? Please comment in the comment section. Let's have a big conversation about it. Let's get nice and lively. If you like this video, please click that subscribe button and check out some of my other videos. I reviewed his recent pilot, Jean-Claude Van Johnson. You can see it right there. Or recently I watched Kickboxer Vengeance. There's my full review for that. With that, please join us in the comment section. Let's have a great conversation. I want to talk to you about Van Damme. Thank you for watching. And so with that, I wanted to talk about the 5 best Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, because, hey, buddy. Just kind of wanted to pop your head in for a second.